In 2011 ben ik voor het eerst teruggegaan naar Korea eigenlijk om vakantie te vieren. En ja, de beide hand was dat ik ook mijn geboortefamilie heb ontmoet. Die hebben eigenlijk heel veel dingen verteld. Kleine dingen, een beetje bij elkaar graaien. Ehm, Mijn vader is overleden in de jaren 80 aan hoge bloeddruk. Mijn moeder woont er nog. Ik heb nog een broer en een zus daar wonen. En eigenlijk hebben ze me verteld dat ehm, mijn vader had meerdere vrouwen in zijn leven. Mijn oudste zus en mijn oudste broer, die ik niet ken, die is geboren bij zijn eerste vrouw. Bij de tweede vrouw heeft hij 2 kinderen gehad. Ehm, een broer en een zus van mij. Eh, de derde vrouw heeft geen kinderen gehad. En de vierde vrouw ben ik geboren met mijn tweelingzus. En dat is eigenlijk wat ik kan herinneren. Ze vinden wel toen ik ze ontmoette, tot ik meteen op mijn vader leek.
Og ude for siden står min biologiske far og læner sig ind over en motorcykel. Og jeg siger så, jeg prikker så min ven, som er med, på skulderen og siger, det der, det er min far. Og så siger hun, gå derhen til ham. Og da han hører, at der er nogen ved gårdspladsen, så vender han sig om og kigger på os begge to og spørger, hvem er Sinead? Og det var så mit koreanske navn, og så måtte jeg jo sige, det er mig.
So in February 2013, me and my sister Malin went to Korea to meet the family. I didn't know what to expect, really. I was nervous, of course, but at the same time I was very, very excited. So we was in a small room in social welfare services office, waiting, and then the interpreter, she opened the door and said, "Well, they're here now," and then five persons just burst in the room crying, and I stood there like, "Hello," and I didn't remember. I don't remember very much from that first meeting. So I'm very, very happy that my sister filmed it. So I have been able to see what it was like, because it's just a blur, to be honest. But they were great. It's a great family. Very loving, very thoughtful, very humble family. And they told me they were very, very poor. And obviously they already had 3 children. And the mother felt that she had to provide for them first. And since I was the baby, I was just 6 months old, that was naturally the first choice, to give me up for adoption. And I do understand that, really.
When I met my mom, it wasn't under the best circumstances, I guess, because it was still where she was afraid to let anybody know about me. She got remarried, and when I was there, I have a stepbrother that was, I think, 4 years old at the time. And it was still one of those situations where if her husband found out about me, a lot of things in her life could go very poorly. And I definitely understand that, not only was it rough for you earlier having me, but now that I'm trying to come back into your life possibly, I don't want to make your life any harder than it was the first time. So for me, it was just nice to see who she was.
I don't really have really a relationship with my birth mother. Part of that is I'm still a secret. Still, that's the main thing, and I've met her twice. So for a total of 4 hours, I've met my birth mom, or been with her for a total of 4 hours in 28 years, which is kind of hard to think about.
What was difficult for me was to find out that she, in an attempt to hide her pregnancy, had a doctor induce her when she was pretty early. I want to say like 7 months or something like that. And that was really difficult, I think, to hear at the time. And since then, we haven't spoken. It just hit me really hard. And just knowing that I barely survived, like my birth, it was tough to take.
J'avais l'impression d'être dans un rêve. C'est vrai que c'est bizarre à dire. J'avais l'impression que j'avais pas d'émotion ou pas d'émotion aussi développée que ma mère et mon père biologiques. J'ai essayé de lui poser des questions à mon père. C'est vrai que c'est bizarre. J'étais omnibulée par ma mère biologique. J'ai voulu lui demander ce qu'il en était de cette femme. Et il m'a dit qu'elle était morte. J'ai voulu lui demander de quoi, et c'est vrai que je ne sais pas si c'était par pudeur, il ne m'a pas répondu. Donc effectivement, suite à ça, je sais, j'ai fermé une page. Je me suis dit, bah, elle est morte. Donc j'ai fermé cette page.
When I met my family over there, the majority of the family were quite middle class. They all had houses. It was a bit odd because we were thinking, gosh, we didn't actually need to be adopted out in terms of Asians sort of looking after each other and families. So it was a bit of a funny feeling in that respect. And I think that they, in a big way, looked after her. She didn't go on to have another husband or kids. And for me, that was quite sad. And it was also an odd sort of feeling, thinking that by no sort of actions of your own, you're in a way responsible for someone else's path in life that's not exactly typically, the kind of path that you'd want for someone.
They were standing there with flowers and with presents, and it was my birth uncle, his wife, my nephew, and my birth mother. And when I first met them, she came rushing over to me and grabbed me and started hugging me and crying and just saying all these Korean words, which I had no idea what it was. I just was very unemotional. I just stood there like a stick. It was strange because I certainly felt like I should have felt something, but I felt no emotion. It was just extremely surreal. And then my nephew finally started translating, and he said, she wants to know if you forgive her. He said, she really wants to know if you forgive her. And I said, yeah, I forgive her, because I said, I understand that I was given up for adoption at a time that would have been just horrible for a single woman to have tried to raise a child with a disability. So yes, I do forgive her. And when he translated that, she burst into more tears and clutched me even harder. And then she was fascinated, of course, and appalled, I think, by the way I walked, because I had the crutch, I had a cane at the time, and she kept patting my legs down and trying to figure out what's going on. So later on, when we were alone, I did take off my pants and showed her my braces and my legs so that she could see that I really did have legs, but they were encased in braces.
And I picked up the phone and I called the number that I had. And a woman picked up the phone and answered in Korean. And I was kind of just, I didn't know what to do. I was wondering, is this my mother? So I didn't say anything at first. And they repeated 안녕하세요. And I said, hello? Does anybody speak English? Because I don't speak Korean. And it was quiet, and I heard them put the phone down, and I heard a lot of talking in the background, and someone else got on the phone and said, I said, do you speak English? I'm looking for this woman. And on the other end of the phone, the person says, that's my mother. And I said, that's my mother too. And she said, I'm your sister. We've exchanged pictures and messages, and even as I'm talking, I can feel my phone vibrating over and over again with
with messages about what kind of music we like and what makes us excited about our days, and where we're gonna eat or what we're gonna do for the rest of the day, and dreams that we have and things that make us scared, and it's just been incredible.
Le premier choc que j'ai eu, c'est de voir à quel point je leur ressemblais physiquement. C'était waouh. C'était énorme de me rendre compte que j'avais des pères, des gens à qui vraiment je ressemblais. Et en plus, on avait un traducteur parce que je ne parlais pas coréen et il ne parlait pas français. Donc, c'était pas évident, mais il y a vraiment une communication qui est à la fois non verbale et au-delà des mots, au-delà de la langue. Et c'était vraiment très fort comme rencontre. Je me souviens, par exemple, après, j'ai été dormir chez un de mes frères qui habite à Séoul, et où ils dormaient tous aussi en même temps, pour cette occasion, pour me rencontrer. Et une de mes grandes sœurs, je me souviens, ils m'avaient laissé le lit pour dormir, et en fait, eux dormaient tous au sol. Et le lendemain matin, quand je me suis réveillée, je me suis réveillée parce qu'elle était assise à côté de moi et elle était en train de me parler en coréen. Et je ne comprenais pas ce qu'elle me disait, mais ça m'a submergée de tendresse, parce que elle était proche de moi. En France, moi, je suis fille unique, je n'ai pas de frères et sœurs, donc je ne connais pas non plus ce rapport, même si je peux pas dire on est frères et sœurs biologiques, mais je peux pas dire que c'est un rapport à créer complètement. C'est pas, on n'a pas grandi ensemble, on n'a pas été éduqués ensemble, mais il y avait quand même quelque chose dans ce lien. Au-delà du langage, il y avait quelque chose de fort.
And before I knew it, I had like a meeting lined up in the Eastern office. And so I was only expecting to meet my mother and grandmother, but my uncle and his wife were also there. And I feel like this is almost a cliche now, but, my mother and grandmother came in and they were just crying and saying something that seemed like, I'm sorry, and they just hugged me so intensely. But for me, it was quite surreal because I didn't, see them and suddenly recognize that they were related to me or anything like that. And, they had all this emotion that that I didn't have, particularly at that point.
I remember we talked through a translator, and I can't remember the phrase now, but at the time I had memorized telling her in Korean that she had always been with me and a part of me, and that I missed her. And when I was able to say those words, I'll always have sort of this mental image of when she looked up at me, and I can still see her face now. Her eyes were welted, and that, I think, was when it all hit me, saying that I missed her. I remember saying, "It's okay, I'm okay, 괜찮아," and it felt like she was relieved that she had made the right decision, and her relief lifted something off my shoulders, made some sort of burden off my shoulders that I didn't even know was there.
It was really my uncle that told me, and it was kind of painful to hear this next bit, but I'm actually very grateful he told me, because I don't think anyone else in my family would have. But he said that it was my great uncle that actually drove me to the agency to relinquish me, and that my great uncle still remembers that day. And I said to him, you know, Imo Harabuji, don't leave me here. I'll be a good girl. And that was it's quite a shock to hear that I was kind of conscious of, on some level at least, of what was happening. Because I think I'd assumed, because I didn't have any memories of that period, that I don't know what I'd assumed, but it was, you know, really surprising for me to hear that, and think about how scary that would have been for a 3-year-old girl. Yeah, so I remember my grandmother like walked out of the room when my uncle told me that, and I've found it really hard to forgive her, you know, for a year or two after I heard that. You know, she also said that apparently a few weeks later she regretted it and tried to get me back from the agency, but Easton told her that it was too late, that I was already in Australia. I wasn't in Australia at that point, but I don't know, I'm assuming that maybe my adoption had already been kind of finalised. I also have mixed feelings about hearing that. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about that. Like, to be honest, you know, I kind of almost repulsed by the idea of giving up a 3-year-old and then changing your mind a few weeks later. But at the same time, you know, I wonder what my life would have been like if she had been able to get me back. I still have a lot of unanswered questions that I've mostly just, you know, accepted that I'll always have questions, and I don't think I'll ever get the full story. I don't think that's even possible, and it was so long ago, and over time, you know, memory kind of changes, I think.
So all of this information came at me within like the first, 15 minutes of meeting my birth mother. So it's very, for me, I tend to, when I'm overwhelmed with information, instead of going deep into it, I'll just separate myself. So I think I just kind of sat there and I listened, but it's not like I was crying, or I was, I don't know, it was like I was just kind of let myself be numb. And then we talked, she felt there was a lot of shame and embarrassment, I think. And I think that's cultural too, but definitely for, not doing her job, she felt like of letting me be adopted out. And so I remember when she first met me, there was like this hand stroke she gave me that was just like, and my aunt came too, just like pressing against my face and just, I'm so sorry, I'm such a bad mother, I'm such a bad person. And at the time I was just in shock, like, why, just like, what is going on? Why are you touching me? I don't really know you.
And I'm sitting there, and the two women are sitting there looking at me, and the one woman says, "Does she have any scars on her body?" And I said, "Well, I have one on my leg." And they said, "That's the only one that I remembered pre-coming to America." And I said, "I remember getting burned by an iron." And she started crying once that got translated. And she said, "It was all my fault. I had just ironed my husband's shirt, and I told you not to go near the iron, but you did anyway. And you burned yourself, but then you knew you were going to get in trouble, so you didn't say anything. You didn't cry. You just sat there." And I had stockings on, so she immediately came over and wanted to lift up my skirt and look for the scar. And I was like, why would I make this up? How would I know this story? And so I'm thinking this woman is my birth mother. It turns out it was my aunt. The woman sitting next to her was my birth mother.
So we got off the plane, and as we were going through the gates, I was thinking, oh my gosh, look at all these people. There's no way we're going to find them. There's no way they're going to find us. And this is what I mean when I talk about the natural bond that you have, that you can't create. It was almost instantaneous when we saw our mom and she saw us. It was within less than a second that we just knew. And we didn't even know if she looked the same. That wasn't even a thought. It was just that that's our mom. And we all just burst out just crying and running towards each other. And I didn't speak a word of Korean at that time. And I didn't know what they were saying, but all I knew was that I felt like I was home. And it was probably the most comforting moment of my life in like many, many years.
Getting to know her has been really hard. The weekend that I spent with her, she barely looked at me, and I barely looked at her. And at one point, she was in the room, and she said, I know you're my daughter, but the last time I saw you, you were 3, and now you're this grown woman, and I don't know who you are. I was so desperate for her to know that I was happy, and that I was okay. And that's all I could say. I'm happy, I'm okay, don't worry about me.